my car and that's flying away and there goes Dorothy right out of the bird.
You want to split it?
Well, that was the first time.
Well, that's on the.
Yeah, that sounds good. Marjorie, are you going to read straight through or are you going to split it up and do a couple of
I was gonna read a section from the opening and then a section from the survey.
So we'll have you maybe pick up a little reading. We'll do a little talking. Okay. That sounds good.
Thank you for if anybody comes.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming to Flyleaf, coming to this event. Your attendance and your book purchases are what let us keep having these events, so thank you. This evening, we have the honor of hearing from Regal House authors Marjorie Hudson and Valerie Nieman and publisher Pam Van Dyk. Marjorie Hudson has recently published her debut novel, Indigo Field. Marjorie's other books include Searching for Virginia Dare and Accidental Birds of the Carolinas. Valerie Nieman's novel, In the Lonely Backwater, published this May. It is the latest publication of Nieman's, joining 4 novels, a short fiction collection, and 3 poetry books. Pam Van Dyk is the managing editor of Regal House Publishing, and she serves on the advocacy committee of the Independent Book Publishers Association. We hope you enjoy the event. Thank you again, and remember you can get a copy of either author's book up front. Have a good night.
Yes, I highly encourage you to shop. I purchased some things already tonight. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Great. Super. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's so nice to see you. I have some familiar faces and some new faces, and it's so nice to have a book club join us. It's great. We always love that because we know you come with great questions. So we're looking forward to that. So, a little bit about Regal House. We were founded in 2014 by our editor-in-chief, Jamie Royal. And her vision for the press was that it would be a small, independent, traditional press, that we would publish literary fiction primarily. We do middle grade and young adult through another imprint, and we have a social justice imprint. But that we would have an environment where our authors could form a community with each other and could support each other, and I feel like that's really happened. So I came on board in late 2018. I think at the time we had 35 authors maybe, and at my last count, I think we had about 250. So we've grown very fast, and it's really to Jamie's credit. She kind of manages it's sort of organized chaos, I'll say, but we do get it done. And so Val and Marjorie are both part of what we call our Sour Mash series. Those are our books from Southern authors, and we established that a couple years ago, about 3 years ago, because we do publish books from authors all over the country, but we wanted to celebrate the place where we live and where we're located, and we wanted to celebrate the tradition of Southern fiction. So, so we founded that. It's fairly selective, so there are some of the books in our catalog that are Southern fiction but are not part of the Sour Mash series, so it's more of a curated series. So I encourage you to go on our website, regalhousepublishing.com, and check it out. You might find something there of interest, or something else, maybe. So I'm happy to celebrate both of these books tonight. In the Lonely Backwater by Val is, so I was her editor, so of course, I think it's a fabulous book. So it's part of our Sour Mash series, and we're going to be talking about that tonight. And we're going to be talking about Marjorie's Indigo Field. So just a little story here. So Marjorie was one of my writing mentors when I was doing a lot of writing. And I attended her kitchen table writers for a short time. And I know she's a fabulous writer, but I think she's outdone herself with Indigo Field. And she can tell you a little more about how that all came to be when we talk a little later. So I think what we'll do is we'll just have a little, we'll start off and have them do a little reading so you get a feel for their book. And then I'll ask some questions, and they'll do a little more reading, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask your questions as well. And I know we're kind of on a schedule here. So, all right, so let's see here. Before we get started reading, I just wanted to ask you both a question about Regal House and how you found us and why you thought we might be a good fit for your books. So Val, why don't you go first?
I've been publishing for quite so many years with different kinds of outlets. And a friend pointed out Regal House and said, you should try, the book is set in North Carolina, you should really send it there. And I did, and was so happy, went through the whole process, waiting. It's like, oh, we're going to the committee, and it's like, oh. And so,
I'm so sorry, it takes forever.
yeah. But I was really excited about the vision that Jamie and all the people at Regal House. I'm sorry, it's allergy season.
And it always happens when you have to talk
Yeah.
too, of course.
And how they work with their authors. Any of you who are writers know that you hear all sorts of horror stories about publishers who don't return phone calls, don't return emails, don't pay royalties, don't do the things that they're supposed to do. Regal House is immaculate. You send an email, you get an answer the next day. Everything really, although it may be chaos inside, runs on clockwork when it comes to the authors. And so that's been a really wonderful experience.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad it's been a good experience for you. What about you?
Well,
What brought
yes,
you to Regal House?
I knew who Pam Van Dyk was, and I think she's a wonderful writer
Thank you.
herself, and just a really smart person. So during a time when the publishers in New York were consolidating, I was submitting my book to agents, and after a considerable number of rejections, they had started to sound like, I actually got 2 emails from one agent, and the second one was an apology for the previous rejection, but you know, and an explanation, which was that she couldn't even get the time of day for the authors already on her list. New York was on fire. I said, okay, New York's on fire. I know some people who aren't. So I made up a list of small publishers. I've worked with small publishers for my other books, and I knew that Jamie wouldn't give me an in, but I thought she was an interesting person and it'd be interesting to have a chance. I had a long list, but I sent to you first. And the funny story about that is that when Jamie called to accept and offer a contract, I said something like, "Are you sure? Are you sure it's not too long?" Because that had been one of the
Because
issues.
I told her it was too long.
Oh, golly. Well,
It's not, it's perfect.
everybody's been telling me it's too long, but I think I was still rewriting, and I kept rewriting, and what Jamie said to me, though, was, I like it the way it is. I do her accent. I like it the way it is.
She has
I like it
British and New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Accent.
I like it.
So I don't know, I can't do that accent. I won't even try. But but I will say, I didn't even know Marjorie submitted her book, and I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we ended up publishing it because it's a phenomenal book. It really is. It's so good.
And we have another connection as well.
We went to Queen's University MFA program
Yeah.
together. The two of
Wow.
us.
And again, I did not submit to Pam, and I don't know if
I don't
you
know
knew
that-
the book was,
I don't think I
yeah,
did.
yeah, we just went through the regular process.
Wow.
So if you're writing a book and you want to get it published, just go on our website and our submission guidelines are there, and you can see how to go through that. And it's a long process, so your patience is appreciated. I think now I would like, just for each of you, and I guess Marjorie, let's start with you this time. Talk a little bit about the inspiration for Indigo Field, like how it came to be, and then maybe you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, I will. So Indigo Field has so much to do with my experience as a newcomer to the South and settling in to living in a rural place on my husband's family farm in Chatham County, my fictional Ambler County. So it's about a sense of place, but it's also about the things that I discovered, and I'll just and how I learned to find my place in the South. So it was inspired by 3 things I like to say, although it really was inspired by living, you know, in my community. The first thing is that I was interested in indigenous history because my farm where I lived was unearthing stone tools from an earlier era, and arrowheads and points and spearheads and grinding stones, and I was haunted by that. And I started researching and writing about the 20 nations of Indians in North and South Carolina. And coincidentally, I began to meet living Native American people in my community at a river festival, a neighbor at church. Turns out my sheriff is Lumbee. Turns out one of my favorite poets in the county is descended from Cherokee people. So I began to just get a sense of the whole of what changed in our culture and where things stand now. Second thing was, I walked into my daughter's middle school, Horton Middle School in Pittsburgh one day, and I discovered that nobody knew who the school was named for. Actually, I didn't know who the school was named for. And I did a survey. My Black friends in my community knew who the school was named for. My white friends had a different story. So I started digging into that and ended up being an activist promoting Black history. 30 years later, we've changed the name of the school and created celebrations. It was named for a Black man, George Moses Horton. You can look me up on YouTube. I love to talk about it. But that's when I discovered that what Black people know about history and what white people know about history are two different things. That became part of my awareness as I dug in as an activist in my community. The third thing is a very simple thing. It happens to writers a lot, certain kinds of writers. I saw a stranger running on my road. I thought, here's a man out of place. Nobody ever runs on my road. This was in the early 90s, and really, you know, jogging had not hit Chatham County yet. It has now. But, you know, he was a little older than me, he's quite a lot older than me. And I thought, okay, you know, wonder where he's from, you know. And then I thought, well, okay, he's probably from Farrington Village, the retirement village across the highway. And then as he passed me, he turned and looked at me and had such a look of devastation in his face that it just about knocked me down. This is the kind of thing that happens to writers every once in a while. You see someone, they're looking at you and they're signaling something to you that goes deep. And it haunted me for days. And the next week I was walking with a friend and I said, I'm gonna write a novel about that man. So I had been writing fiction for a while. I'd been having a little bit of success. So I took my hubris and jumped right in. And 30 years later, I had a final draft after many, many drafts and help from my writers group. Thank you, Francis. And encouragement, you know, which we all need. So that's the story about how I was inspired to write this book. I had a draft in the late 90s, about 450 pages. I didn't know how to end it. I kept going. It got really long, 700 or 800 pages. I learned to cut. Best thing I ever learned.
Well, you're a great editor too, so I had no doubt that was on your mind when you finished that first draft. How to go back and do a little editing. So set us up here what you're going to read.
All right. So I'm going to read a little bit from two of the characters who are really kind of the main characters in the novel. And since so many of you have already read this book, I'm going to skip that really beautiful opener. You can go back and read yourselves. So I'm going to read from my characters based on the jogger I saw on my road. Colonel Randolph Jefferson Lee, retired Army, prepares for his daily run, which he's lied about for months, telling Anne he will stay in the neighborhood, he will call her on the cell if he gets in trouble, and he will keep it down to a stroll, a slow walk, no running. Rand glances guiltily at Anne sitting at the kitchen table, her fluffy, just-washed, white blonde hair, her head tilted in that funny way of hers, peering through her fancy multicolor reading glasses at the paper. The lovebirds chatter in their cage next to the window. Anne's deep into her morning routine. Looking out the window now with pursed lips, something on her mind. He wonders sometimes if she thinks about Malaysia, their last posting, and all that happened there. But now she turns to the lovebirds in their cage, lifts the latch, and that mischievous grin, that morning joy, is back. God, she's a beauty. How did he ever catch a woman like her? By pretending to be a man who belonged in a place like this. So our colonel, who you now know, has been running and lying about it. And during the first couple of chapters, he runs and goes across the highway, which he's not supposed to do, enters the territory of a different world there. And he tests his heart by running up a hill every day because he'd rather die in the woods of the Gully Ridge with the scented pines than in a hospital. He has a great fear of having a heart attack. So that kind of gets him started. And this day when he comes back from his run, he has the surprise of his life, you may remember, and it sets him on a new path and a completely new direction in his life. So I want to read my favorite section about Miss Reba. Miss Reba is the elderly Black woman who lives across the highway, and she has been grieving the loss, the murder of her niece Danielle, whom she raised from a little girl. And so her life is very, very different from Rand's life, but she's also just devastated in her own life. So one day her local reverend comes to tell her about things that are going in the court case, in the murder case, and it's not going well. So Miss Reba, who keeps a list of the crimes against her family by white people in the back of her Bible, makes a decision. Night breeze catches in the sycamore tree, snags at Reba's arms and neck like cobwebs. Since the Reverend left, all she can think about is seeds to plant, garden to weed, Mama's flower bed gone to ruin, and all she's wanted to do is sit here with Danielle's ashes in her lap. Reba closes her eyes, sees Danielle, a little girl, always wanting to sit in her lap, always wanting to hear the old stories. Are you an Indian, Auntie? She would ask, all those little hot ribs pressing against her chest like bird bones. I guess I was, for a time. All your herbs and potions, they Indian things. Old Lucy taught me. Reba had told her about old Lucy. Old hermit lady, yes. And when Reba would take her to the field for gathering, the girl would run around just like Sheba, pretend she was dancing an Indian dance, those big colored birds flying over her head like in old Lucy's day. The child was certain that one day the Indians would come back to the field. Huts and cook fires, birds and singing, but Danielle is never coming back. And it's all because of Tommy J. Snips. A rustle in the sycamore tree, caused by no breeze. Avenge her, old Lucy whispers. Sycamore leaves clap in applause. Old Lucy loved vengeance. That is the Tuscarora way. Something murky flaps in Reba's chest. How to make this feeling go away? Get up and do. Miss Reba goes inside, lays the box with Daniel's ashes on the mantel next to the pink one for Mama and the blue one for Papa. She washes her town dress and pressure stockings. She hangs them on the line in the dark. She polishes her Sunday shoes. She pulls the Charles Chips can down from the high cupboard, pulls out her father's old solid steel service revolver. She sits down with a cotton ball and tooth powder, cleans the rust off as she's seen her papa do. Then she lights a kerosene lamp, carries the gun and the lantern out to the fence, shoots at cans. She gets used to the hard pull of the trigger, the weight and surprise of the gun in her hands, like a slug of iron with a spark of hate inside. So Miss Reba has a plan. I'm not telling you what it is.
I was just going to say, don't you love this about writers, though? And this is what makes a book so great. In the first section with the Colonel, he mentions Malaysia and all the things that happen there. We don't know yet what that is. It's already introduced the question, what happened in Malaysia? And the gun. You know, the writer, the author, Miss Reba, has been given her a gun, and we don't know yet what's going to happen with that. So it's brilliant. I love the way that works. Yeah. All right, Val. So tell us, give us the background on In the Lonely Backwater.
Well, this book was slow developing, not as slow as yours, but I have another one that's even longer than yours. But this one took a while. It really has kind of three threads moving through it. One is that I was always a girl out in the woods, picking up mushrooms and looking at birds and this kind of stuff. And I had notes toward a thing about a young woman who is out botanizing in the woods, but I didn't know what's happening, what's her problem, and there's got to be something happening. So that was sort of there. Allied to that was a renewed fascination with Carl Linnaeus as a result of my friend Fred Chappell and his story about the great botanist. And so that kind of reawakened. I thought, I was like that in school, about that categorizing and everything. So that was kind of sitting there. Another part of my background is that I was a reporter, and I was the police beat reporter, so I covered a lot of murders and drownings and arsons, all sorts of stuff. So that was kind of, I had never really written a mystery, although this is kind of an odd mystery. It's not the classic kind of thing. So I was thinking about that. But what really got us started was I was moving yet again, long story, and I found my high school yearbook. And in it was a small class. We had 100 members. So I should remember everybody, right? Well, here on one page is a really cute blonde girl, and she's written on her image, I hope that we can get past our argument, or I don't actually have the exact thing right in front of me, that we can get past this. And then she signs it love. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So we've had some sort of disagreement, and then she says love, and I don't remember her, and I don't remember what the argument was. But I got to thinking about that and those passionate times when you're 16, 17, 18, where everything means the world, and you are willing to go to the wall for things. So they all kind of clicked together with this young woman in the woods and this mysterious inscription in my yearbook. I'm actually going to go to my 50th high school yearbook reunion this year. Never been to one. So it should be really interesting to find out if she's going to be there and what it was all about. Also, the book has love sailing in it because I was sailing at Carlike. And Maggie has a little boat, and that boat is very important to her. So Maggie has problems. As the book opens, she's 16. Her mother has run up. She's had enough of living in a kind of cruddy old marina in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina. And her father has taken to drink as a result. So Maggie's trying to hold things together at the marina, and she just doesn't fit in at school. She does not fit in really anywhere. She's, one of those outsider kids with a couple of other outsiders. And so she is facing all of this. At the same time, she's trying to figure out who she is in a lot of ways. Who is she going to be? Scientist? Fiction writer? Round the world sailor? She's also got some issues about who she is. She's a tomboy. She doesn't do girl stuff. So a lot of things working. So I'm going to let her tell you. This is how I remembered it. There wasn't anything wrong between Cherise Swicegood and me, except she was her and I was me. And with the family history and all, it was just natural. She won the genetic lottery. Tall, but not too tall. Good boobs, smart, but not too much. Green eyes and blonde hair and all that. And her family owned more land than God and always seemed to know what to do with it. Grow cotton when prices were high, grow tobacco when an allotment was pure gold, grow square footage in second homes when the lake went in, and they were suddenly blessed with water views along the acreage they'd left in Piney Woods. The Swicegoods went back to the Carolina settlement, like the Cobles and the Alfords. My so-called mother was an Alford, so Cherise was related. So here I am, Maggie Warshower, which is what I call myself, even if I'm legally Lenore, with, I guess, not all that much going for me except a real good brain and a strong body. If you turn back the yearbook page from Cherise, you'll find my picture at the end of the junior class, and it's the way I really look, straight, short brown hair, and a chin that wouldn't look so big, except I have this little pug nose, maybe all I got from my, as they say, biological mother. Track and field, ecology, Scribblers Club. There's no place to list my real work. Cherise and me were pretty much okay with each other, a few squabbles. But we had another fight in school the week before she disappeared, a big one. And then I wrote that stupid thing on Facebook. You know how it goes. Finally, she messaged, "I hope we can talk this out sometime." And now she was missing, and the yokel cops were looking for something, because they didn't know anything. So she's going to come into contact with the detective, it's very rural county. Drexel Van is going to walk into her life. And she doesn't think too much of the police around there. She makes everybody a category. So she makes people into boats, for one thing. And she thinks, he's way down there. He's like this little crappy aluminum John boat. He's not like a good boat. He's just nothing. And as the book goes along, they are going to be twisted together more and more and more as he follows the very twisty clues about how Cherise, who is missing, turns up dead on a boat in the marina, a locked boat in the marina in Maggie's backyard. So I'm going to read another little piece where he has come to the marina to talk with her. And here's where he arrives. "Maggie, ahoy there." Van was leaning on the rail near the rusty barbecue grill, but he stayed on the dock and did not set foot on the boat until I came out and met him. Somewhere he'd learned about boats and etiquette. A couple of lawn chairs were on the deck, but he didn't seem to want to sit there. "Do you mind if we go inside?" Great. I imagined what he was thinking. A kitchen with kid-sized appliances, a rickety table with 2 chairs, and the living room, a bench seat and a pull-out sofa where Dad sleeps. Cheesy nautical lamps, a fifth of rum on the counter, and the smell of liquor from bottles poking out of the trash. I could tell by the way he looked around that he had questions that weren't just about Charisse. So he asks what they were doing that night, her and her two friends, Nat and Hulky, a couple of guys. And she doesn't want to all the way level with him. She's got her privacy. And she's also a little embarrassed about her situation in many ways. But she does think about it, and she doesn't share this, but she shares it with us. Charisse shows up on prom night at the graveyard of a historic church, and they were not expecting her. "Hey guys," her voice rose way up at the end. "Hey Charisse," Nat blurted out. She followed his voice, uncertain as she walked across the graves, maybe because of high heels, but when she got to us we could see she was barefoot, and there was a gash down the turquoise shimmer of her dress. Her face didn't look right, but everyone looked ghoulish as the moon went in and out of the clouds. I could feel the boys sweat, see how they repositioned themselves as they sat. Charisse was Charisse, not Maggie. "How was the prom?" Hulky asked. She sat on the tombstone, just like us commoners. "Oh, hell. I bet it was so hot," said Hulky. "Me and Nat were riding around in the truck, you know, and all these kids standing in front of their houses just sweating buckets while moms and dads took pictures. Some kind of time. I hope they enjoyed it." She began pulling apart the smashed flowers in her white and yellow wrist bouquet, shredding the petals into her lap. "I'd rather be here," said Nat. "I bet you're happier here too." Charisse smiled on one side. I knew what the guys were feeling, that they wished they could have put on a rented tux and showed up at Charisse's door in a limo and taken her to the prom. I even felt like that. Some. Wishing I could put on a show that I had a dorky regular dad and mom to fuss over me and get me a dress that they secretly thought was too revealing or too expensive. And I hated myself for this wishing, just like the guys, and we all would have ever denied feeling like that.
Mm.
I love that. So another thing that writers do, and this is to elevate a character, for example, is to show them by comparison. So here we've got Maggie and we've got Charisse, and the setting, of course, is a big part of it too. They're in a graveyard. This is where these Maggie and her two guy friends hang out, and then here Charisse shows up in a prom dress, a little tattered at this point. And again, we don't really know what happened. We know she's missing. We just don't know what happened to her yet. So that's great. So I was going to ask, both of you write a variety of genre. So Val, you write poetry, you've written other adult novels, literary novels, short stories, short story collections. Marjorie, you have an essay, Searching for Virginia Dare, a collection of essays, and you have a short story collection. So as a writer, does the story come to you and then you determine the genre, or do you just start writing and think, I don't know what this is yet? Marjorie, what about you?
Gosh, yeah, I always know which genre I'm going to write in. And I think if I'm writing in a fiction genre, it's something tugging at me that's a little mysterious. If I'm writing essay or creative nonfiction, it's a subject I'm interested in, but I know I can find out more about it if I do research. So, it is mysterious. It's a more mysterious process with fiction.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going usually, although I will say the surprising thing, I wrote The Crisis of Indigo Field first.
Okay.
Once I had the first section with Rand, I knew who the characters were going to be, and I wrote The Crisis first. Very weird thing to do.
Yeah, well, but maybe not. And then it's a process of discovering all that goes on around that crisis, right, and how people react to it. What about you, Val?
Well, poems come as poems. They feel different. They have a whole different feel. But in fiction, I have written all over the map. I've written science fiction, blue-collar realism, a Southern crime book, a very strange book that was somewhere in between Appalachian folk horror and eco-justice about the coal industry and the coal mining. And then this one, which is classified as mystery or as suspense. For me, it's the story, and I don't know where it's. I don't set out and say, oh, I am going to write a mystery, or oh, I'm going to write, Appalachian folk horror. I don't think that way. The people start talking. Something happens where as soon as Maggie started talking, she's got that voice. She's got a chip on her shoulder. She's pushing people away. She longs for connection, but at the same time she's like, get away from me. And her voice was just from the very start was very powerful. And so then I knew that things were not going to end well for Cherise, but I didn't know how things were all going to work out. And as I wrote, and there were all of the different possibilities of maybe this one did or maybe this one didn't, and how Maggie is seeing the world and what she's reacting to. And so it, made its own path, and the end has a sort of a double twist, which again I didn't expect, and I had to rewrite it a couple, 3, 4 times to get it right. And Marjorie and I share, we give each other manuscripts. I have read Indigo Field several times, and you read Backwater, and so we push each other. But yeah, I do not follow a set plot.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you both too, if you have, if there are certain things that fuel your creativity. Do you have writing rituals, or something that do you sit down and light a candle, and do you only work in the morning, or do you go to a special coffee shop? I don't know. Do you have a certain writing ritual that helps inspire your creativity?
Oh no. I was a working journalist for the first third of my career or more.
Keep a little pad in your purse. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you always had to work in bits because maybe you were working on a big story, but then the scanner goes off and you've got a 3-car wreck with fatalities, and away you go. So you're always writing in little chopped up bits, and you have to keep the story all up here and come back to it. And so I was always able to work that way. I mean, now I'm retired. I have, quiet and time. I need coffee. I need quiet. I can't write with music, anything like that on. And I need my books around me. I have so many books, and just even kind of seeing them there, sort of like, I remember you. And sometimes I'll pull something out of one of them, like a quote or something, but not a set ritual. And the way I look at it is, every day you should be doing something writing related. But for me, that's not always meaning words on paper. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's walking around in the woods observing. Sometimes it's doing research. My next book is a historical, and I spent a month hiking in Scotland so that I could feel the ground. So it's all writing related, but it's not necessarily words on the page.
So,
what about you, Marjorie?
Yeah, I was talking to Mary Hart about this just earlier. So Hemingway said this thing that everybody seems to believe about, you have to keep your butt in the chair and write every day. Well, not quite. It's not quite what he did. In fact, it's really not what he did at all. But he did there's something really very helpful about setting aside time to generate a draft or to generate a revision, a set period of time with a deadline. So that really helps. I'm a morning writer, but I wake up in the middle of the night and write notes. When I was really deep into this, it just kept coming at me and coming at me. So I went on writers' retreats to try to figure out exactly what I had done. That worked in a way, but I spent a lot of time rolling around on the floor and groaning. That's part of my process. And trying to figure out, what did I do? But at some point you have to kind of break things down and do timelines. So I used charts, because some of you know it's a kind of a long, complex novel. And one of the things I did in my charts is I created arcs for each character and each secondary character. And they didn't all happen at the same time, you know, because that would be weird. And then I created arcs for the metaphors, for the objects that became metaphors. What's happening with the birds? What's happening with the tables? And so I did that using search and replace, which is this great navigation feature. You can create and so I would look for table. And I knew what I had done, but I wasn't sure if I had the center of the arc. I knew the beginning and the ending, for example. There's one table that's a handmade table, and it has a whole story about it. And then there's a second table that's a kind of a historic antique table, and that has a whole arc and has an emotional connection. So one of the things that I realized makes my writing dense is that every object has a meaning. You know, I'm not letting anything in a particular sentence, a particular paragraph, get away with being extra.
Right. And it's very layered.
Yeah,
Both of your works are very
right,
layered
right,
because
right.
you have a lot of threads and you have characters and each has a different thing going on. And you have multiple points of view in yours.
Right.
So I don't know, how are we for time? It's 20 till 7. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions from our guests. So are we going until 7 or till? Okay. Well, so why don't each of you do another reading and then we'll open it up for questions. Does that sound good?
So I'm going to read something I've never read before. Yeah, it makes it an adventure for me.
This is going to be a raw reading, just right off the
Right,
page.
it's raw. But I have to say, there's a lot of swearing. Raise your hand if you'd rather I didn't. No, it's really okay. Okay. I'm reading this in honor of my friend Frances, who is here and who is my bird mentor. Took me on a tour of the birds of Durham and took me to a cocktail party for birds and took me to a gas station sing-along with a bird and took me to a place where I felt a connection with a bird that was so deep I just really couldn't believe it. So I learned something that day and through a lot of other research too. So my character Rand has been away for a while and he comes home. He is not fond of the birds. He likes free birds. He doesn't like caged birds. And while he's gone, his son Jeff, who's kind of not really his favorite person, has been taking care of the birds. And one of the things he did was he turned on the radio because he thought the birds were lonely. And he turned on rap music. So that comes to play in this section. At 11 a.m., Rand turns the key and pushes the kitchen door open, but it snags on something. He bends over to see. Green feathers, red beak. Jesus, it's one of Anne's lovebirds. He picks it up. Limp body, claws curled and hard. That mark over the eye. O'Malley. He clutches the bird to his chest. Oh, bloody hell. Jeff was supposed to take care of them, damn it. He flicks the light switch. There's one note he left on the table. All instructions clear. The cage door is open and Molly is huddled inside, chattering weakly. Full food dish, full water, holes scattered all over. Sweet bird, sweet bird, sweet bird, he calls, and she stops, cocks her head, looks at him, takes a step toward him, cocks her head the other way, sees the dead bird in his hand. She shrieks and flaps away, beating her wings against the cage until green feathers go flying. Then she sits there, quivering. Sweet bird, Rand whispers, voice cracking. He wants to reach all the way in, bring her outside the cage and hold her against his chest. He wants to feel that quivering, hollow-boned body, that fast racing heart fluttering against his. But he's never done that before, and right now it might scare her to death. He tops off her feed and water, but she has no interest. She only quivers. He does the only thing he can think of to calm her. He covers the cage, darkening it so she can sleep. Then he picks up the phone to call Jeff and ream him out. But there's no answer. A knock on the door. Jeff? No, his neighbor Bess pokes her head in and says, "You're back. How are the mountains?" "To hell with the mountains," he says. "Ann's damn bird is dead." "Oh no, Rand, what happened?" "O'Malley got out," Rand says. "She'll probably die too." Ann always said lovebirds don't do well in singles. They are sold in pairs. Bess goes silent, sees the bird on the counter, rests her fingertips on it for a moment, as if she could bring it to life with touch. "I'm so sorry, Rand," Bess says. "Are the other ones okay?" The other ones. Rand turns and sprints to the den. King P dances at the sight of him. "Oh, bloody hell!" It's my bird imitation. Queen Pia says, "Fuck, fuck, fuck." Pia's got a new word. There's some kind of filthy rap music on the stereo. Without a doubt, Jeff's been here. He turns it off. Damn him. Irresponsible. Always screwing up. The birds have plenty of food. The rug beneath needs vacuuming. He stands there watching them eat and shit, watching them perk up. These are sturdy birds, strong birds. They can survive a lot. He stands close to the cage, rests his forehead on the wire. King P fluffs his crest and pecks at Rand's hair, pulls out a few strands and eats them. "Yum," King P says. "Yum, yum." He goes back to the seed tray. Queen Pia opens her beak and grips one of Rand's fingers through the wire. She bites hard. "Ow," Rand says. "Happy apple," she says. "Fuck." Yes, exactly. Fuck. Pia looks him in the eye, cocks her head, awfully pleased with herself. "Won't be able to invite polite company over," he tells her. "Not with your potty mouth." For the first time, he really looks them in the eye. First Pia, then King P. They eye him and twist their heads around and coo with unrepressed delight. Do birds love? All he knows is that in nature, ones like these travel in enormous flocks, ravaging the countryside in a raucous gang. Men could shoot whole flocks, because when one died, they all came back. To save him, to grieve. Maybe birds get lonely in a cold, empty house with dim light and the smell of blue pile carpet. Maybe they missed him. Her. They're staring him in the eye. For the first time, he feels an attachment like a fishhook pulling on his heart. Rand raises his head and sees Bess standing there. "They're okay," he says, but comes out like a sob. "Goodness sakes, Rand, what happened to your leg?" He looks down. The bruise is a spider web of black and pink. There is something really wrong with it. "It's fine," he lies. "I'm fine."
Wow. Not fine. Okay, all right, Val, how about you? Let's have a little
I'm just
more
going to do
fun.
something short. As I said, she's looking at becoming a marine biologist. She thinks that's what she wants to be in her life. And she's been talking with her teacher at school about that. And remembering, because he says, well, you should go to UNCW, go to Wilmington, and study at the Center for Marine Science. And she remembers. I could see Wrightsville Beach, the morning all the Portuguese men of war had come in. Early morning, breaking day, the tide returning. All down the beach, the crimped floats shone in the sun as it broke through the clouds. They were clear and iridescent, the tentacles a gooey magenta mass, but still dangerous. One float, the top crimped together like plastic that had been heat sealed, was inching a rubbery foot toward the water, still alive. The base of the float had a greenish liquid like a bottle that had been left with water in it, and algae had grown and bloomed. Was the liquid part of the organism, or a symbiont, or just dying organs? Her teacher keeps rattling on, and she just keeps remembering. We had been staying at this cheap hotel, more like cabins. The memory came up like the jellyfish on the tide, pushed up to where it couldn't be ignored. I was walking on the beach that night, a windy, starless night, and I was stumbling in the rough places and sandcastle digs, sand stinging my face, crying and walking, the salt wind and the blown sand and the roar of the waves that drowned everything out. I was walking toward the lights, that big hotel called the Blockade Runner, and the people were outside dancing and drinking, and I wondered if there would be terrible fights in there too, and name-calling, and things crashing, and bruised faces in those nice hotel rooms.
Wow. It's so nice to hear an author read her own work, isn't it? I think so. You get a real feel for what sort of the tone and what they were going for. Okay, so let's open it up to some audience questions. Anyone?
Oh, come on. I know you want to ask questions.
Okay, well, I have another question.
What?
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
So, on page 235 of your book, Marjorie,
Yes.
Rita's talking, and she's talking about the circle of help, which was probably the most prominent thing I took away from the book. Like, when I read that, it struck me so hard in terms of how she viewed life.
Yes.
And the issue of kind of the class separation, because people didn't respond to just a simple concept of the circle of help. So I was wondering if that was just something that impacted me, because when you get to the end, Rand is back actually kind of having that epiphany of the circle of help and what he's doing for Reba. So I was just wondering if that was intentional. But when I got to that part, it was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of a rubric for the whole book. And maybe that was just me.
Thank you. What a great insight. No, the book has a very deep moral and philosophical basis. I am trying to look at how people go across boundaries and how they get connected. And I, observed it in my community, doing community work with at-risk families and also with families in the retirement village who have a lot of privilege. And so that's something that I really see in my community, and I love that Miss Reba articulated it that way. It's not something I came up with. She kind of came up with that. And yes, the arc of the story bends towards justice, which is how I hope our world does, and it bends toward the circle of help.
I love that.
Yeah. It's something to think about, right? And I'm actually thinking about making a list that I can give people who they get to the end, well, wait a minute, how can I help? Because I do have many ideas on that.
She's going to roll that right into her social justice work.
Absolutely.
For sure. But it is a good question, and I think it's one of the nice things about the novel. One of the many nice things about the novel is that for everyone to really be able to do the things they need to do, they do have to all pull together, and they pull together from all different places, right?
And it kind of relates to what Val is looking at in her work, which is how teenagers get separated from any kind of support because of their dire parental situation. And, that's something we see all the time. It's a kind of truth-telling that Val is offering us. And I think her help, if any, comes from the relationship with the detective more than anything.
Yeah, Maggie is definitely looking for a father. She's given up on her mother, but she's reaching out. So the detective who needs to be investigating her, they're getting more and more drawn together, even as he has to investigate this crime of which she is a suspect. And but other people, the Cito man and the teacher and other people, and they have their own backstories. Drexel Van, the detective, she's interrogating him and finding out about his family traumas at one point.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, everybody's trying to find some kind of wholeness. All of us are, whether you're doing it, you know, in her way more as a loner or whether you're doing it as a group, but to find some place where we feel that we are complete.
And that it really does take a village in so many ways to be able to achieve the things you want to achieve.
I do have a question.
Yeah, great.
In gatherings like this, oftentimes the writer will hear a question or a comment and think, oh my God, I wrote that? Did I mean that? Yes. I'm sure you each have that type of an epiphany that a reader has provided for you. Would you care to speak on something like that?
Well,
Go first.
we love readers who read more into our books than we knew was there. and talented, deep readers, because I think a lot of what goes on is for the writer subconscious, and then other people tease it out and they say, did you know? And it's like, I really,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we get deep into our characters and the characters are doing their things and we're writing this, but an incisive, intelligent reader who puts together some of the things that we may not even know are there yet.
Subconsciously, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an interesting moment, which is I gave the novel to a friend who's a member of the Saponi band of Okanichi. And he gave me this big grin. And he's an expert on trickster stories. And he said, it's a trickster story. I'm like, well, I you know, there's a little dog and he plays tricks, and I meant that as a trickster story, but then I thought, I am playing all kinds of games with naming. The name that people know is not the true name. So there are all kinds of tricks that I'm playing, even unto the structure of the novel, the title of the novel. It's all a trick. And you get it. I mean, it operates without you really thinking about that a whole lot, but he got that. That was really cool.
I love
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, so I guess that, you know, what happens, an author writes a book and it gets published, and then it's up to the reader after that.
Yes.
And then whatever happens with the novel is up to the reader.
And you all bring different things.
Right, exactly.
Every reader comes to the book and it's fresh.
That's right. So we have run out of time. I want to say a couple things. I want to say thank you first to Flyleaf Books for having us tonight. We really love our community booksellers. They do so much for their communities, and we're really hoping you support them. And thank you, Alex, for helping us out tonight and getting us organized. We really appreciate that. So yeah, shop Flyleaf if you have a book on your to-read list. They're open for a minute or two more. Yeah. So, and thank you so much for coming. And if you have any questions, or you can reach out, where can they reach you, Val?
Well, I think we have a few minutes, so you can get another strawberry and we can answer.
Okay, that sounds
So,
great.
And I just want to say also, just to reiterate that, independent bookstores are what allow us to survive
Mhm.
and to get the word out about our books. So
And
please
to
do support them.
freedom of expression and the availability of books. We're in very parlous times, so and the indies are the shining light.
That's right. That's right. So great. Thank you so much for
And I
coming.
want to thank Regal Publishing for bringing us these authors.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Absolutely our pleasure. Our privilege and pleasure. So yes. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That was so good.
Huh?
Do you remember riding around and looking at all the talking